Good afternoon, everyone, to an event hosted by the Bipartisan Policy Center. We are so grateful that you are here with us today. For more than a decade, the Bipartisan Policy Center has been fostering bipartisanship by designing and advocating for meaningful bipartisan policy solutions that promote health, security, and opportunity for Americans. Today, I'm really excited to welcome Senator King and Senator Fischer, who don't get enough credit for one of the most important bipartisan solutions in my favorite area of interest, paid family leave. We are going to talk about the Strong Families Act, which they championed together, bipartisan from the start, bicameral from the start. It was passed into law in 2017, and just this last December, the pilot was extended for another 5 years. And this new program provides a 25% tax credit for employers who want to offer paid family leave. And that paid family leave can go to new parents, birth or adoption, family caregivers. 53 million Americans who are caring for aging loved ones or adult dependents who often have emergency moments that they need to take away from work and cover their caregiving time, and for personal medical leave. Should you have a medical emergency, go through cancer yourself, get hit by a car, or have a mental health issue, medical leave can be a tremendous and really important policy to cover that experience. America is one of the only countries in the developed world that does not have a national paid family leave policy, a national parental leave policy. But in 2017, these two senators came together and forged a new idea and got it passed into law. And it is now accessible to employers to start implementing and growing access to paid family leave. Most people don't know about it. So today we're going to get to hear from Senators Fischer and Senator King, who helped spearhead this policy and have brought it into law, and learn more about what brought them to the issue and how they intend to move it forward, and what more we can be doing to get access to it. So Senator Fischer is the senior senator from Nebraska, elected the same year as Senator King, the junior senator from Maine. And as I was reviewing bios today, senators, I was looking for key things to say about you, but I want to say something that you both have in your formal bio, which is the second line starts with your commitment to bipartisanship and working across the aisle. And that is very rare in the US Senate to make that a core tenet of telling people who you are. But I know it's a big reason why you work together on the Senate Armed Services Committee and why you work together for American working families on issues like paid family leave. And I am so excited to have you here. So Senator King, why don't I start with you and learn a little bit more about what brought you to this issue and your work around paid family leave?
Well, first, there was a key phrase you used, Adrian, which is people don't know about it. And one of the reasons they don't know about it is it was a bipartisan success. I'm sure everybody has observed that the coverage around here is mostly of conflict. For example, 2 nights ago, we passed on a bipartisan basis a historic piece of legislation involving competition with China. I think it got 68 votes, which is pretty amazing. And it got 68 votes, but it didn't get much coverage. And the same with this provision, which really is a historic provision. It's the first national paid family leave law in the country's history. Deb and I both came into the Senate at the same time in 2013, and I honestly can't remember how we struck upon this originally, but it was something that I think we both introduced jointly in 2014. And I can tell you from my point of view, I don't like talking about things, I like doing things. And as we all know, there have been proposals about family leave and making it part of the Social Security system. And in fact, I support some of those proposals, but I also wanted to get something done. And I knew that the votes weren't there to get a broader proposal done. And this was a way that we could actually do something important on a voluntary basis as an incentive to the private enterprise. Now, the exciting thing is when it was first passed in 2017, it was a 1-year proposition. It was then extended for another year and extended for another year. And then this past December, it was extended for 5 years. So our modest 1-year proposal has now become an 8-year facility that's available to private business across the country. The important thing now is to let them know of its availability. And I know we're going to be talking later about the human capital, human resources people, but I can tell you from talking to people in Maine and both businesses and employees, this would be one of the most popular benefits any company could offer their employees. And essentially, the way it works is they get a 25% tax credit, not a deduction, a tax credit, which is a dollar for dollar off your taxes if they provide paid family leave for their employees. So it's a strong incentive for the private sector. It's voluntary. And right now hopefully we're in a place where the extension is long enough, and Deb and I advocated for this. It's long enough so that a company can say, oh, okay, we can do this. It's not going to disappear in a year or two. So we've got a 5-year running room from this past January 1st. And I'm really hoping to see American companies grab onto this, because I think it would clearly benefit employees. I think it would benefit companies. So, and this is one of those issues where, you know, you can't let the best be the enemy of the good. You've got to be able to try to accomplish something. And, you know, if you do the arithmetic around here, really to get things done, you need bipartisan support. And that's what Deb and I managed to put together, and it happened in the House. And here we are with what I think it could be a very important program.
I couldn't agree more, Senator King, and thank you so much. I'm now going to turn it over to your Republican counterpart on this bill, Senator Deb Fischer.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the Bipartisan Policy Center for hosting this event, and a special thank you to Adrian Schwer. Adrian latched onto this with focus early on. We held an event in Omaha, Nebraska, where she brought together young women so we could talk about the needs that they have. And then to be able to get my friend, Senator Angus King, to be a co-sponsor here on the Strong Families Act. You know, I started out in 2014 with some great staff here in Washington, D.C., where we came up with the idea. And then to get Angus there, who's very, very focused as well, to be able to work on the tax incentive that would be able to increase Americans' access to paid family leave, while also being cognizant of the realities for working families and small businesses. We always hoped that it would become the first nationwide paid family leave policy in the United States history, and it did. Enacting the provision into law, it took a lot of patience and it took a lot of tenacity. And I was really, really pleased to be able to get it across the finish line as part of tax reform. So then we worked on the challenges of implementing the credit, and we were able to secure that 5-year extension in December. So it does go through 2025. So now what is really important is we want to spread the word so that more businesses can take advantage of this program. I like to say that what we came up with is a carrot approach. It gives businesses an incentive to give their employees more flexibility when they're facing family worries. And whether people need to care for a newborn child or an elderly parent, you know, Americans they're juggling a lot of responsibilities at home and in the workplace. And our program is targeted to help those who need it most. And that's lower income or hourly workers. These are people who typically don't have access to paid family leave. Research shows that most individuals with salaries above $75,000 per year, they do have access to family leave. And large employers, they generally offer greater access to leave. So our tax credit is limited to employees who make $72,000 a year or less, because we want to ensure that the benefit is going to those that need it the most. The program's voluntary for employers, like most paid leave offerings in America are. It is not a mandate, and it really gives flexibility to expand the access to leave. As we learned this last year during the pandemic, for many small businesses, success starts with keeping the lights on and retaining workers. And this initiative, it really gives small businesses a significant tax credit of up to 25% if they make a change and offer paid family leave to their employees. So it's something that can make the lives of American families better. We want to raise awareness for the policy. We want to encourage business owners to take advantage of it. We want to get as many businesses involved as possible so that we can see if this program is going to be working the way we intend it to work. I was really encouraged to see a discussion draft that was released recently by members of the House Ways and Means Committee that builds on our tax credit. And in part, they're looking into strengthening the benefit for small businesses in particular, and that is something that I fully support. In closing, I would ask that everyone in the audience explore the various ways that this tax credit can alleviate the concerns around paid leave. We want as many businesses involved in this program as possible so that we can gather that data and see if it works for families and really helps to provide that flexibility that people need.
Couldn't agree more, Senator Fischer, and thank you and Senator King again for both being here. I want to dive into a couple questions to learn a little bit more about what brought you both to the issue and then how you kind of forged this compromise. And then following our discussion, we will have a conversation with Lisa Horm of the Society of Human Resource Management. So a lot of our audience are business leaders and HR executives who are thinking about implementing policies just like this. And don't worry, we will get into the details in the weeds in just a little bit. But Senator Fischer, you know, we've been talking about bipartisanship, and when it comes to the issue of paid family leave, which BPC has been working on for almost 3 years now, there haven't been as many Republicans working on the issue. And in fact, you were one of the first to really pick up the helm. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about what brought about your passion and then explore a little bit more about how we can foster that in the future and in the private sector.
Yeah, you know, men and women in the 21st century workforce, they face, I think, very unique challenges in caring for their children, in caring for older family members. So they're squeezed. They are juggling responsibilities at home. They're juggling things at work. And I think they're really facing more and more stress in their lives. So that's what drew me to the work on a paid leave proposal to address the problem. There's been a lot of focus, I think, in with many of our colleagues on maternity and paternity leave. And Senator King and I'm very proud, and I know he is too, that we're looking at family leave and trying to alleviate some of that stress that families feel, not just with the focus on maternity and paternity leave. You know, there weren't very many senators on my side of the aisle that would talk about the issue or become engaged in the issue. I think my male colleagues, they weren't focused on it necessarily, maybe not comfortable with it. So I guess you could say I was, again, pretty persistent in getting in their faces about it and trying to, first of all, educate, but then trying to build support. So I kept bringing the issue up. Republicans have lunch 3 days a week, so they got kind of tired of listening to me. Maybe that's why I just bore them down. But I like to think I woke them up, and they had a greater understanding then that this is important. And we did have a solution. We have a solution that would help families. So it's exciting today, years later, to see how many Republicans really want to work on this issue. We laid the groundwork for that engagement. We also had the benefit of others who brought a lot of attention to the issue. So I have a lot of people to thank.
Thank you. And I want to pull a thread on one point and learn a little bit from Senator King. You know, Senator King, most of the federal proposals, when you look at them in aggregate, are addressing parental leave, the birth of a child or adoption of a child. But you and Senator Fischer's policy covers all three types of FMLA qualified leave: parental leave, family caregiving leave, and medical leave. Why did you lean towards comprehensive coverage, and why for all three?
Well, I think first the demographic reality of Maine is important. Maine is the oldest state in the country. How old is it? Its junior senator is 77. But seriously, and I think we're sort of a canary in the coal mine as our whole society ages, and the responsibilities for elderly parents and elderly family members is a very real fact of life in my state. And also, I'm the father of 5 kids. I mean, I know about what happens with kids, you know, and they always seem to come down with a fever at 8:30 in the morning, just when everybody's ready to go off to work. And so this is something that I didn't have to be persuaded very hard, was important because of the reality of the lives, as Deb says, in the 21st century, particularly where we have both parents working. And then if something happens with the child or with an elderly parent who may be in the house or who may be down the street, it's just something. It's a very important part of being able to function and keep the family working together. So I want to give Deb a lot of credit, because the bill originally became part of the 2017 tax bill, and as you all know, that was essentially a Republican initiative. So she had to muscle this into that bill. And I can't claim any credit on that score, but we've worked together subsequently. But I think on the extensions, but to go back to your original question, this is straightforward helping your constituents. I mean, and that's what we're hired for. So it was just a great opportunity, and the Bipartisan Center really helped us with this, and helped to generate support in the House. And as I said before, now we've got to just be sure people know about it, so it can be a benefit that's available to people all over the country.
Well, I think for our audience as well, it's important to remind them that, bipartisan policy looks a lot of different ways, but when the original legislation is bipartisan and bicameral in its core, it often lasts longer. And this 1-year pilot moving into an 8-year extension says a lot about the truth to that statement. And I think within the paid leave construct, it's important to look almost 30 years back at FMLA, and my colleague and friend and mentor, Senator Dodd, who architected that law, made it bipartisan and bicameral from the very start, and could have gotten a lot more out of that law, as he said many times, but wanted to be faithful to his colleagues who had stood beside him. And we now have a 30-year law that's really changed a lot of lives and helped us build upon it with programs like the Strong Families Act. I want to revert back to, before we lose the two of you, one reality that you both pointed out. The last year in the pandemic has been really hard on a lot of working families. And it really illuminated the challenges that working families, not just parents, but also family caregivers, have been experiencing. The Bipartisan Policy Center has been studying unemployed Americans to try and better understand what forced people out of the workforce and what might get them back. And we found that 15% of people that left the workforce during the pandemic left for caregiving reasons. That could equate to about 11 million people. And of those who are sitting on the sidelines, who are currently unemployed, 40% said they would go back to work faster if the job that they were offered was offering paid family leave. 50% of parents said that they would go back faster. Wow. That feels incredible to me, and a driving reason for employers to take a look at this tax credit. And I would just love to hear from you how you think we really build that out for employers and help improve the odds that paid family leave, if offered, might get people back off the sidelines. And I also would love your perspective. A lot of people are concerned that a tax credit isn't going to bridge the huge gap we have of people who don't have access to paid family leave. And while that might be true, there's a lot we can do to gather data on usage and to study the impact of this policy over the next few years to make sure that we learn from it and implement additional changes or more policies in the future. So I'd love to hear from the two of you how you think the pandemic has changed that, and what you think we can do to either prove the effectiveness of this policy or guide ourselves in the future.
Deb, you want to take the first step?
Okay, thanks, Angus. Yeah, I think the pandemic has really underscored how important flexibility is for people. You know, adults at home, they got pretty weary of being a caregiver and a teacher while also working from home full-time during the pandemic. And the stress that people felt again while they're trying to make it all work, that shows why businesses should look into this program as a way to offer paid family leave option to their workers. My team is also engaging heavily with employer groups and caregiver groups such as AARP and the Alzheimer's Association to make sure that they know that this is out there and available. And we're doing that outreach again so we can determine what the best way is to equip employers as they look into offering this to their employees. You know, many small employers, businesses that our tax credit could really be a game changer for. They don't have huge human services teams there. They have to do all their benefits planning alone, basically, while also running their businesses. So for me, it's a priority for us to be able to make it easy for them to understand what this credit is, how it works, and how they can take advantage of it.
Adrian, I think one of the important things here is that as we come out of the pandemic, everybody's looking for workers. And there's a lot of discussion about, how we're going to get people back into the workforce. But this, I think, would be a very attractive benefit that a company, when they're talking about, signing bonuses and things like that, if a company said, and by the way, we're going to have this paid family leave program that's available to people that come to work for us, that's going to be an incentive because a lot of people, we don't know exactly why people aren't going back in, but I think childcare is a big issue and reluctance about the pandemic and is it really over and that kind of thing. And also, of course, there's a discussion about the extra unemployment insurance, which will eventually go away. But if employees, the whole reason you offer benefits is to have happier, more productive employees. And this is one that I think will have a lot of appeal. So our challenge now, as Deb says, is to make sure people actually know about it and can take advantage of it. And I just think, to me, for an employee, it would be like a little insurance policy. It's a little security blanket in the back of your mind. If something really bad happens, I'm not going to have to choose between putting food on the table and looking after my grandmother or my child. So I see it as a win all the way around. And the important thing about the extension is that a company can now undertake this without fear that it's just going to evaporate in a matter of months. And of course, hopefully, we'll be in a position where there'll be enough people taking advantage of it that it will have a solid basis to go forward into the indefinite future. But I think, and again, the important thing is that it was bipartisan from the start, and that's the way you get things done around here. And it's I think when Deb and I first introduced the bill, the Democrats were in the majority, and then the Republicans were in the majority. And I don't know what you call it now when it's 50-50, but that's the way policy sticks. And so this is an important measure for our constituents and for the country.
Well, Senator King, Senator Fischer, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your persistent work on this important policy and the persistent work that we will work alongside you to ensure that as many people know about the tax credit as possible. And hopefully it can drive increases in how many workers have access to paid leave, especially those who need it the most. So thank you both for being here and for your service. We can't wait to work with you more in the future.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you.
Great to be with you. See you later, Deb.
See you later.
Okay, bye-bye.
And to our audience, thanks for being here for our first portion of the event and staying for the second. I am really excited, as Senator Fischer and Senator King said, giving people more knowledge about the importance of paid family leave policies to workers and how they can implement a policy just like this one I am lucky to be joined here by a friend and colleague, Lisa Horn, who is the Vice President at the Society of Human Resource Management and has been working in labor and HR policy for more than 20 years, and who knows quite a bit about this policy and frankly, what HR managers and employers and managers in general are facing on the front lines of policy implementation within companies pre-pandemic and today. So Lisa, thank you so much for being here. Let me turn it over to you for some opening remarks before I dive into questions, pre-prepared questions and questions from our audience. To the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to tweet the Bipartisan Policy Center or ask on social media, and we will look to incorporate them here. Lisa, over to you.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Adrian. Thanks so much for having me. Thank you to you personally for all of your tireless work in this space, and to the Bipartisan Policy Center for its leadership on paid leave. And ultimately, or today's session, highlighting the great, really great bipartisan work of Senators Fischer and King. They have certainly set an example of how policy makers can, of course, work across the aisle to achieve consensus. And that's going to be incredibly important as Congress works towards a national paid family leave policy. SHRM certainly appreciates the opportunity to join today's conversation. Our 300,000 plus HR and business professionals who impact the lives of more than 115 million workers and their families are really the individuals who are on the front lines of implementing paid leave programs in both small, medium, and large organizations in every sector and every industry. And I would say that, you know, throughout the pandemic, HR has been there really every step of the way, in many ways acting as the workplace first responders, leading their organizations through some of these difficult challenges that the senators just highlighted. One of those is rethinking and navigating changes to paid leave policies and offerings. Some of these challenges, I think, as Senator Fischer pointed out, were particularly felt by those small to medium-sized businesses. For example, those with fewer than 500 employees were navigating those new and at the time very unfamiliar paid leave requirements for the first time with the passing of the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act, or as we affectionately refer to it as FCRA. So while FCRA leave requirements, of course, as we highlighted, ended at the end of 2020, the tax credits afforded for them to offset employer costs were, of course, extended through September of 2021, providing an incentive for those organizations to continue to offer this leave. And I'm pleased to report that it looks as though many are continuing to offer it, according to SHRM research. For example, 73% of organizations that were required to provide paid leave under FCRA in 2020 are voluntarily providing emergency paid sick leave in 2021. And 60% of those organizations that were required to provide paid leave under FCRA in 2020 are also voluntarily providing the emergency family and medical leave under FCRA to their employees in 2021. And last but not least, before we dive into questions, I just wanted to highlight that SHRM research also examined why, answering the question why these organizations have voluntarily decided to offer or continue to offer the FCRA leave to employees. And 70% are offering it to, of course, boost employee retention, which, as we just heard, is incredibly important at this time. And 60% said that they were offering it to access the tax credits. So I think that this is very relevant to our discussion today about the Fisher-King tax credit policy.
Thank you, Lisa. Those numbers are staggering and really say a lot about what companies want to do on behalf of their employees and what their employees are asking of them. I mean, to see that 60% of them are still voluntarily offering the paid family leave when, you know, only 21% of workers normally have that type of paid family caregiving leave pre-pandemic times says quite a bit about employer behavior and the importance of these policies. I want to pick us up to a 30,000 foot view to look at the importance of this policy. I think a lot of our audience probably already knows some of this, but I'll just highlight paid family leave is really good for business. Not only does it increase employee happiness and retention, it reduces costs to recruitment, which are high right now, but it really, really improves workers' ability to come back to work and stay connected to your employment. And it's one of the most valued policies that a company can provide its worker. We're really seeing the new generations of workers prioritize these benefits, sometimes over even pay. And Lisa, I'd love to know, you're on the front lines, your research team looks at this data all the time. When you're thinking about benefits, when employer provided benefits, what do employees value and where does paid family leave stack up in that ranking?
Well, employees certainly value paid leave, whether it's paid family and medical leave, PTO, et cetera, as an important benefit that they're looking for in their total compensation package, which is why I think the trend line continues to go in the right direction in terms of employers who are voluntarily offering these benefits. And as we see, they continue to do it post or, continuing as we're coming out of the pandemic. But even before the pandemic, we saw that that trend line going in the right direction. We had teamed up with Oxford Economics for some research that was fielded in late 2019 and released in 2020 that it showed, in fact, that employers are offering more paid parental leave, including maternity leave, paternity leave, and adoption leave. Over half of employers, that being 55%, now offer paid maternity leave, 45% are offering paid paternity leave, and 35% provide paid extended family care leave. So again, I think this is a sign that employers are being responsive to the needs of employees, and there's a bottom line business benefit, as you alluded to, for offering these benefits. Benefits an employer's recruitment efforts, the retention efforts, and at the end of the day, employers know that employees are their most valuable asset, and ultimately to get them in the organization and to keep them, you have to offer that appropriate mix of benefits and compensation to get top talent.
So for our audience, a couple details about the tax credit that are important to know. As Senator Fischer described, high wage workers and workers in kind of the most tech fields and in what I would call like professional jobs are more likely to have access to paid employer provided paid family leave than their hourly counterparts or lower wage workers. The disparities are huge. And part of the reason that the senators designed this tax credit to only go to only qualified employees who make less than $72,000 a year is to really inspire employers to start providing paid family leave to hourly workers and to lower wage workers, and hopefully bridge some of the racial disparities that we're seeing in access to paid family leave. But that makes it complicated from an HR executive or a tax policy expert's implementation of the policy. And what's made it even more complicated is that when the law passed in 2017, it took the IRS almost 18 months to provide guidance on how employers could use the policy, what was covered, what filing looked like, how to access this policy. And so, as Senator Fischer mentioned, they had a year extension, but the December 5-year extension really creates a new level of stability for employers to access this policy. But I want to highlight, and Lisa, I'd love to turn it over to you. One of the challenges we're seeing is that, the key federal agencies, the IRS and the Department of Labor, don't have a ton of information on how to implement these policies. So employers are really relying on events like this and organizations like yours to get information. Do you still see that as a problem? And is there more we can be doing to help encourage the IRS and Department of Labor to communicate about these policies?
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head when I think even the senators alluded to this. This really comes down to awareness of the tax credit. And as you rightly pointed out, when it was first enacted, the fact that it was only a 2-year pilot and that guidance took so long really, I think, gave employers great pause. One, they didn't know about it because it was new and it was a part of a larger tax package, but the guidance taking some time, again, knowing then would it be worth implementing it when it was, at that time going to expire, really gave a lot of employers pause. And then now with the extension, that certainly that helps. But I think there also, because of the tax credits that were implemented for FCRA, I think there's also been some confusion about this tax credit, and it's been overlooked because what has been kind of front and center is the FCRA leave and the tax credits associated with that. So general awareness of the policy certainly is lacking. And I think that you and I saw this when we were doing a panel for the SHRM Workplace Policy Conference, and you had talked about this policy, and then the number of questions that were put in the chat, many of which were from HR professionals and SHRM members themselves, asking questions about the policy. And I would argue that we have a great deal of robust resources outlining the policy, and a very robust knowledge center staffed with HR advisors who field hundreds of thousands of questions from SHRM members each and every year. And yet we're not getting that many questions about this policy from our members. We do offer a sample policy to HR professionals who want to implement this in order to get the credit. And interestingly enough, I did a little research, and it's been viewed 987 times in the course of the last year, which isn't a lot compared to some of ours, but it's also not insignificant. But in talking to those leaders of the Knowledge Center, again, if you go to even the IRS's website, where the general website is to get information on the tax credit that we're talking about today, the main site does not allude to the extension, and neither do the FAQs. And a lot of employers still rely on that guidance from, of course, the agency. If you dig a little deeper down into the Form 8994 that employers obviously will look at, the extension is mentioned there. But I think that some greater awareness and promotion of the credit on behalf of the agency's guidance is always needed, and the more that it can be explained and the extension highlighted, I think, can be very helpful.
Thank you. I want to get to an audience question. James, thank you so much for being here with us. You have a really important question about whether the IRS has published any data on take-up of this tax credit, and whether it has moved the needle at all on increasing access to paid family leave for workers. And I will tell you that, that the Bipartisan Policy Center has not been able to find any raw data published by the IRS on usage of the policy. I think for many of the reasons Lisa and I were just discussing, there was a lack of guidance to use it up until that kind, it was like 18 months of a 24-month cycle of the pilot in and of itself. And then right at the time when guidance really existed and people could be exploring the policy, the COVID-19 hit the country, and we implemented the important FCRA policy, which was also a tax credit and designed a little bit differently. And one thing about the FCRA tax credit that I will highlight for this audience that's different from Strong Families and worth exploration is that you could, as an employer, if you provided the benefit and claimed the tax credit, you did not have to wait for your filing timeline to get those resources back in your company's pockets. And this Strong Families does require you to wait till the traditional employer tax filing process to get paid back for the paid leave that you provided your employees. And so I am very curious, as you all know on this call, the traditional April tax deadlines changed quite a bit this year, and both people and employers have seen delays in those requirements. So I'm very hopeful that once the IRS has had time to process the meaningful data sets that they have, both on the FCRA tax credits and hopefully on the Strong Families tax credits, we can get data on usage and determine whether it's increased employer provided benefits in any way, shape, or form. As someone who studies some of these policies, I am concerned that the data sets that would be meaningful, statistically significant to really understand impact of a policy like this are going to require a year or two of study and of aggregation. But I am hopeful that retroactive data sets, if we can get our hands on them from federal government, could be really illuminative and important. So we will keep you posted on that. And James, I just want to thank you for that question. Lisa, please jump in.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, I think that this is so ripe for research to determine how many, of course, are using it, how many, this was the incentive that ultimately moved employers to offer a paid family and medical leave program. And more importantly, what may be ways to improve it, or what are some barriers to implementing it. So I definitely think that this is an opportunity for further research to, again, gather that data so we can perhaps even improve the policy.
It's great. And I know we are running out of time, and everybody in our audience has been so generous. So I want to wrap up with a couple closing statements here. American families need policies like paid family leave. American workers need policies like paid family leave. I have big, bold dreams, like many people in this audience, of a really robust national paid family leave policy that reaches every worker and really meets the needs of the country as it stands right now. I think we live in a very different world. I mean, as Senator King alluded to, it is a 50-50 Senate. There is no true majority, and the House is operating on slim margins. And really robust national policy is hard to do in this environment. But every time that we chip away and get more people access to paid family leave is an opportunity to help serving more families. And I am passionate about finding each and every one of those opportunities, including ensuring that this tax credit gets as much take up as possible, and we get paid family leave to as many workers making less than $72,000 as possible. And there are many other ways that we can work on paid family leave. So you heard Senator King talk about the then called Endless Frontiers, now called Competition and Innovation Act, the Combating China bill. There was this little tiny provision in it that's so important. Many people on this call might be passionate about, getting more women into the STEM fields and keeping them in the STEM fields. Well, research has shown that women off-ramp in the STEM fields at motherhood because most don't have access to paid family leave, and most don't have flexibility in their grants and research dollars from institutions that allow them to take any time, unpaid or paid, and still meet the requirements of their grant and their research obligations. Well, that law offered a new requirement for an oversight body in the federal government to set some new standards for federal grantees and researchers that would help support family caregivers, new parents, and family caregivers who work in research and STEM fields. And that alone could have a tremendous impact in keeping female researchers in the science and mathematics and engineering career fields in those career fields for the long term. Those little things are never going to meet the national crisis that we face on paid family leave. And I have a lot of dreams about what we can achieve, but every one of them improves the situation and improves our country and improves our family. And we'd like to be a part of that. I hope that we can continue a much more robust discussion on paid family leave. And Lisa, I would love to turn it over to you for some closing remarks.
Well, thank you. And thanks again for having me. I would just like to underscore, how, the Fischer King Strong Families Act is absolutely a step in the right direction. As both senators alluded to, it offers employers an incentive. It's voluntary. It's not a mandate. Some key, principles for SHRM when we look at paid family and medical leave. But it's only one part of the solution. And it doesn't address some employers' overarching concerns about the still in existence, patchwork of state and local leave laws that really do pose a continuing compliance conundrum from employers. And that's why SHRM has long advocated for a national voluntary federal framework for paid family and medical leave. And we look forward to working with policymakers towards that solution going forward. And as I think the entire conversation has encapsulated, it must be bipartisan in order to get it across the finish line, to make it meaningful, and to have it be a lasting policy.
Couldn't agree more on that last point. Well, let me thank you, Lisa, for being here today. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for joining us, for your passion around paid family leave. The discussion does not end here. If you are curious to learn more about how to implement the Strong Family Tax Credit, go visit SHRM's website. As Lisa says, they have example policies and lots of FAQs and can guide you in all the right directions to get the details for implementation. And if you are interested in advancing paid family leave at the national level, please look us up at the Bipartisan Policy Center, and we will help point you either to our work or the work of so many other amazing researchers in the Paid Family Leave who are doing heroic work to bring this to more Americans. So thank you for being here. Happy Thursday, everybody, and I can't wait to see you at the next BPC event.